Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So these are just some bits and pieces I have done in the past before doing junk journals. Mostly oil pastels and acrylic paint. These are a couple of abstract ones. So the idea for this came from the background papers I made 2 videos ago. I was trying to think of something different to do than the junk journals with them. And I'd been watching Karen Campbell, Mixed Media Artist, this morning, and she does like cartoon ladies. They're almost fairy-like ladies with, really quite stylised backgrounds. And I thought, I could do something like that. And I thought, well, I'll do one of the abstract faces. Now, this is as good as my drawing ability gets. I much prefer using oil pastels and acrylic paints than drawing, because I find drawing's actually quite a difficult thing to do, whereas when you're using the colours it just seems easier. So these are the background papers that I made. They're actually, this is the set that didn't work out well, because at the time I put them down I was planning to still do more work on top of them. I'd used black and white on these sheets and it gave a lot of greys and it just wasn't that pretty to look at. So anyway, I'm just shaping them round her face, using matte medium to put them down. This is an MDF wood panel, which it is made for art, but the reason I bought it is because the canvases and canvas panels are quite expensive. The canvas panels that I was buying, they were a really good price, but they're all square, and I find square is quite a hard area to work in. So I'm really pleased with how these went down, and I like the torn lines in them as well. That it doesn't just look like one complete piece, that you can tell it's been torn up. So these pages here are, I'm not sure how vintage they are, but they are very yellow I'm assuming the book has been sitting out in the sun. But it is a copy of The Hobbit it wasn't good enough to sell, so I use it for art. So I'm doing her body and some of her face with these papers. Now, these papers were very good to work with in the more detailed areas. Like, I use it on her mouth and they really were easy to shape. When I do her pupils and her irises, I'm using a thicker, stronger paper, and I found it hard to manipulate that so well, and I ended up with the pupil and irises being quite square, and that did affect when it came to the painting later on. It was harder to paint around. So here I decided with the collage to actually put in the kind of colour scheme as well. So I'm using blues for the shadows and yellows for the highlights and kind of orange and greens for the mid-tones. So you can see the black and white picture on the top left-hand side. This is a picture from Canva. It was in colour, but I have made it black and white, and there was quite a lot of contrast in that picture, so it meant that it gave you a good indication of where the light is hitting her face. So the picture itself is not a picture of anybody in particular. However, the angle that the person's sitting at and where the light is hitting her is, I did use that photograph for that. My brain does not seem to be able to work out where the light should be and where it shouldn't be. So I was very grateful to have that photograph to work from with that. And I found with the collage as well that actually it was much easier to do the highlights and the shadows. And I think it's because you're tearing paper, so you're not... I found I got less bogged down by it. And it was easier to just accept it as good enough. Whereas if it was just a full painting, I feel like I would just keep going over and over and over and over blending, and you know how it goes. It's like a vicious cycle. You just go round and round trying to get it right. Whereas with the collage, it really helped. It helped define the areas, and it helped me look at it a bit differently, I think, where having the perfect blend wasn't necessary. So there is quite a lot of work going in here, but the areas where I did, really take my time with the collage and really try and match it up to where the light and the shadows should be, it did, when it came to painting, it really made a difference. I do apologise for my head keeping on peeking into the shot. I'm working on a much larger size than I normally would on camera, so I've had to reposition the camera and myself, so unfortunately you see more of me than you probably want to. I have sped this video up to 5 times the normal speed as well, because it's quite slow work. So you don't want to sit and watch somebody collage for 2 hours. It wasn't 2 hours, probably about maybe 90 minutes. Anyway, so on her left cheek, I have quite a dark shadow area, which was a bit of a mistake because the shadow on her face in that area is not that dark. And this actually caused me problems later on because the darkness of it didn't sit well with the rest of her face, because it was obvious it wasn't supposed to be that dark. Like the bit on her neck should be that dark, but it shouldn't be that dark on her cheek. So I should have used one of the different shades of blue there. But I did end up making a bit of a feature of it. She has an ear just now, but she doesn't keep the ear. The hair ends up covering her ear. I do need to practice more on the ears. I was really happy with how the nose turned out, and noses can be quite difficult, so yeah, that worked well, but the ear didn't. So we're coming near the end of the collage section, and then we'll be moving on to the painting section. So I used a kind of blue and orange theme. I used Payne's Grey, Cobalt Blue, titanium buff and raw sienna and metallic copper. They're the paints that I used. Also, when this is dry, it does look a lot more well defined. Just now it looks a bit blurred. However, once the matte medium's dried, you know, it does work together. I was really happy with how the lips turned out, actually. It felt like it was quite messy when I was doing it, but I just stuck with my instinct in the picture and just did what I felt was right and didn't try and... No, I felt like I just did what the picture kind of says you should do, although in my head I was thinking that's really messy looking, but actually when it came to painting it, it really worked out quite easy to do, which was good. I do feel like the collage section's quite long, however, I think that this is what makes the picture overall in the end, because it kind of guides the painting. And also, if you wanted to follow along, it kind of helps you to see, because just now the colours are all working together, but whereas when I was putting them down, you know, it was a lot more separate, as in, so on her forehead it just looks like a mixture of oranges and whites and yellows, whereas when I was putting it down it was a wee bit more strategic than that, if that makes sense. Anyway, so now we're painting. So this is Payne's Grey, and what I did was I started painting over the blues, which was daft, because what I should have been doing was doing just a glaze over the whole picture. Well, that's what I feel I should have been doing. I'm not actually sure what the correct professional way to do it is, but for me, I'd already defined the blue areas, so I don't know why I was going over it again. Now I'm starting to do the glaze. So I use Payne's Grey, and I don't use the cobalt blue until the very end, and I just put one very thin glaze of cobalt blue over the person. And when I say glaze, what I mean is an extremely watered down acrylic paint. So this is me using raw umber to sort of start defining the shadows and the features a bit more. I was really trying to avoid using black and white, so I used raw umber and titanium buff. I was really pleased with how these worked, actually. I feel like the colours in her face are like the colours that you find in map books and atlases. I'm taking that as a good sign. They work well together. So I I was really pleased with how her nose turned out. I mean, it's not a classically beautiful nose in any way at all. However, I feel it's got character, and I feel it adds to the kind of abstract look of her face. It's quite hard doing the jawline because it's hard to not get it too thin or too wide. You can see where it's starting to go wrong on her left cheek, because the paper that is, the very dark part, because the papers around it are actually on top of it at the edges, it makes it more, what's the opposite of elevated? And that makes it look darker as well. And it's also harder to blend because it's got those sharp edges around the sides. I end up covering that and starting again. So this is the titanium buff. Starting to put the lights on. It's quite nice seeing that eye starting to come together, because it sat there for most of the picture looking quite obscure. Oh, and I really liked it. I did really like her nose. I really feel the titanium buff on it just really helped define it. It does show you the difference it makes. Now, I'm not sure. I don't know what the element is called for the highlights and the shadows. Is it value? Is it value? I'm not sure. But it does help bring it to life when you put the shadows and the highlights on, for sure. I do feel quite sorry for her, because it does look like she has a horrendous wound on the left side of her face. We do repair it to an extent. I do like how the right side of her face definitely looks further away. I was really pleased with how that turned out. I think every time that I put the raw umber on there, all I'm actually doing is making the sharp lines around it look more well defined. I do like this stage where you're using the mix of the raw umber and the titanium buff at the same time to try and get the balance right. So this is raw sienna I'm using for the hair. I also use the raw sienna watered down a lot as a glaze on the background papers. And I put it on her lips and on her eyebrows as well. A wee touch in the eyes. It's quite a neutral colour, the raw sienna, and I actually really like it. I did try to do her ear. Now, at first I tried to make it into a hair bun. That was silly. It looks ridiculous. And then I did try to do the ear, but I decided to give her a bob instead, because that just helped everything. So I'm adding some copper here to her hair, and I feel like she's starting to look like the lady out of the Fifth Element film with Bruce Willis. She had quite a vibrant orange hairstyle. I think the bob matched in very well with her very angular features, and it kind of brought them to life more. She really suited it. I'm still not 100% sure what to make of her, because in some ways she looks absolutely beautiful, and in other ways she looks like a creature from another world, like in a Marvel movie or a sea creature. She looks powerful, and that's a good thing. I'm very happy with how this has turned out. So I'm using the raw sienna to make a glaze here, and I do 2 coats of it, and I kind of wish I'd done it a bit more patchy so that some of the original background paper tones were showing through, because I feel like I made it a bit more flatter than it needed to be. But it doesn't, I don't think it detracts too much from it. So this is the cobalt blue, which I'm using like an extremely watered down colour. I just wanted to make her just a wee bit more, not cartoon-like, because I don't want her to look like a cartoon, but abstract. I wanted it to be more of an unnatural blue, because she's got unnaturally orange hair. And I think it works well. Part of me thinks I should have just left it at the Payne's grey, and then the other part thinks, well, I think the cobalt blue does add to it. So this is the finished picture, and I really love it, and I'm hoping to do something similar soon. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.